12 o'clock. It is Monday afternoon now. Welcome into the halftime show. It is Tyler Head flying solo along with you today. Terry Ford will be back in with me tomorrow, taking a day off. Believe said it was the girlfriend's birthday this weekend, so got to make sure the missus has a good birthday weekend. And again, Terry Ford will be back in with me tomorrow afternoon to give his reactions to what was a very, very busy weekend across the board for Gamecock sports, and we certainly enjoyed some highs and lows, some good things and some not so great things. We'll certainly get to that, all of it, over the course of the next couple of hours here on the halftime show. But the big deal. There's a couple big deals. Obviously, we can't gloss over the men's basketball game against Florida, which was another resounding victory for Lamont Pearson Company. And again, we'll certainly get to that more in detail a little bit later. I'll let you hear from my conversation with Jack Veltri a little bit later, a little bit earlier on in the morning. But I want to start off with baseball because there's always an anticipation, a high level of anticipation for this Palmetto series between South Carolina and Clemson. We have both teams coming into this contest, or coming into the weekend, with just one loss apiece on the season. There was this curiosity, I guess is maybe the best way to describe it, of both teams being put to the test truly for the first time. Yeah, Clemson had lost that game against Kennesaw State last weekend, and South Carolina had likewise done the same thing against Belmont, but for the most part, they had handled all of their opponents pretty routinely, run rule games, big wins, all that kind of stuff. So we were very curious to see what it was going to look like when these two teams squared off against each other, both ranked in the top 20 in the various baseball polls heading into the matchup. And, you know, it's one thing to lose games. It's another thing to lose games by one run in the fashion that South Carolina did, because I think that stings a lot more. And then when you couple that with the fact that you were taking on your in-state rival, I think that's just a little bit more salt on the wounds for Gamecock fans. All that being said, I don't think it's a reason to hit the panic button necessarily, but there were some things that concerned you a little bit when it came to the when it came to the weekend series, or the two games at least they got to play against Clemson, because of course Friday night at Founders Park ended up getting washed out, and they're working to reschedule that game hopefully a little bit later on in the season, so we'll get a proper series out of it, even though Clemson does clinch the series win with two victories over the course of the weekend. The one stat that really stuck out to me, though, was runners left on base. South Carolina left plenty of ducks on the pond over the course of the two games, 12 on Saturday and 10 on Sunday, as South Carolina was just having trouble, being able to plate those guys once they got them out there on the bases. And it wasn't like, Clemson wasn't giving them free passes. Put 9 runners on Saturday. Only 4 of those walks, 5 of them hit by pitches, which, by the way, I feel so terribly for Gavin Cassis, because he was just a human punching bag on Saturday, getting hit by a pitch 3 different times. I was thinking back to when I was playing Little League baseball and high school baseball, where hitting hit once isn't fun, but it's like, okay, maybe that was a bad pitch, got away from whatever. Getting hit, it's like, all right, don't enjoy that either. Again, when you get hit a third time, you're ready to go out there and start swinging on someone. And you saw when Cassis got hit the third time, kind of a quick, show of emotion, but they quickly wrangled it back in and, didn't have any problems there. But nevertheless, not fun getting hit. That being said, to get 9 free passes in each of those games, South Carolina, again, just didn't really do a good job of capitalizing on that. The big, takeaway stat is being 4 of 37 with runners on, which obviously shows that South Carolina was just not able to string together runs when they needed them. It's great that Petrie had his 2 home runs. Messina had his home run on Sunday as well. But, from an effective offensive standpoint, just not quite clicking in the way that you wanted it to over the course of the weekend. And give credit to Clemson's pitching. They did a very solid job, especially when it came to strikeouts, 14 on Saturday and then 9 on Sunday. And look, we knew this was going to be a step up in competition for what South Carolina had seen so far this season, playing the Miami of Ohio's, playing the Belmonts, playing the Winthrops, the Queens, all that kind of stuff. This is a high caliber pitching staff with a team that has aspirations of going to Omaha, so you knew they were going to get tested a little bit. And South Carolina certainly needing to pick up a little bit in terms of the, small ball type stuff. Power's great, and hitting home runs is fantastic. We hope South Carolina hits plenty of those over the course of the season, but, stringing together some singles, doubles, and that kind of stuff, when you have runners on, especially when you have runners in scoring position, is going to be very beneficial once conference play rolls around here in a couple weeks. So, again, the ultimate goal of this weekend was to win and beat your in-state rival, but also, use this as a litmus test. Gauge where your team is, where your program is at this point in time, and hopefully build on that going forward over these next couple weeks, where you do have a couple more non-conference games before you take on Ole Miss in the first series of SEC play coming up on St. Patrick's Day weekend. So not this upcoming weekend, but the following weekend. On the defensive side of things, when you look at pitching, and, South Carolina got the opportunity to do things a little bit differently because you did not have that Friday night game, so they decided to move Eli Jones, who is their ace of staff, it made sense, into that role as a Saturday starter. So basically a day later, so he'll be on a little bit shorter rest coming up with his game, with starting this game coming up on Friday for the Gamecocks. And look, he gave up 9 hits, which isn't great, all things considered, but I thought he did a decent job of mitigating the damage, only giving up 2 runs on that Canarella RBI double in game number 1. And that's kind of the story of the pitching staff as a whole from this weekend, where the hits were certainly not what you wanted. And again, both games you end up giving up 5 runs, but it could have been a lot worse, all things considered. SQ comes in and gets the start on Sunday, starting in game 2 as he normally would, and did a pretty decent job the first time through the order. Sat down 8 batters in a row at one point in time after giving up that Will Taylor home run in the first inning. But once he started getting through the lineup a second time, where he started to show problems and started to show cracks, ended up only giving up 2 hits, but ultimately 3 runs over the course of 3 2/3 innings there. You bring in Roman Kimball, again, who is, supposed to be your Sunday starter, so you kind of compressed your 2 starters from Saturday and Sunday into one game there. 3 hits and 2 runs there, and then Ty Good came in and pitched a good inning in his 1 inning of work with 2 strikeouts, but unfortunately South Carolina's offense could not quite step up there. The person I feel the worst for over the course of the weekend was obviously Garrett Gainey, who came in and threw a gem on Saturday night in 3 2/3 innings, mainly working those extra innings for South Carolina against Clemson. But unfortunately, the one thing that people are going to remember coming away from that game was obviously Seifo's walk-off home run in the bottom of the 12th there that ended up ending the game. But other than that, that was literally the only hit and the only run that Garrett Gainey surrendered. So it's unfortunate that it had to end that way, and you hope that you can use that as maybe some sort of motivation and fuel going forward when it comes to, the future pitching performances. But plenty of reasons to be excited about what Garrett Gainey is going to bring to the table as a bullpen option, as well as Ty Good as well. Again, he only had the 1 inning of work on Sunday, did very good there, and has shown very well in his outing so far this season. So South Carolina has a lot to work with as far as the bullpen goes, and again, maybe not the best outing from your starters, but those guys that have, looked really good through the first couple weeks of play, with the exception of SQ, who, again, had the rough outing against Belmont. You couple that with what happened on Sunday, you do wonder if maybe there's a question there of maybe Becker sliding into that starting role for Saturday. That's something we've talked about a lot, for him as he's getting back to closer and closer to full strength at the at the end of the day. But all in all, again, you hate losing to your rival. That's not what you want to do, and you want to at least come away with one victory from the weekend, trying to split things there. But didn't happen. Again, when you talk about 1-run games, a couple things happen differently, and Coach Kingston talked about this after the game, or after both games on Saturday and Sunday, that in 1-run games that 1 or 2 hits can make the difference there. That situationally, if South Carolina can execute from an offensive standpoint, we're talking about them, them coming away with these victories as opposed to Clemson, excuse me. So hopefully that's something again that you can build off of. You have Citadel coming up. You got a couple more mid-majors over the next couple of games to continue to improve on, again, before you get into that thick of conference play with your SEC slate, starting off with Ole Miss here in a couple weeks. Longwood coming up this week in your final non-conference series. Then Georgia State next Tuesday at SRP Park before jumping into that away series at Ole Miss, again, coming up St. Patrick's Day weekend. But all in all, no reason to panic necessarily. Again, we knew this was going to be a true litmus test for this team, taking on another top 20 opponent in Clemson in the 2 games that you played them. And again, play a third game, maybe it goes South Carolina's way. Maybe those hits do fall South Carolina's way a little bit more. And who knows? Again, we'll see if South Carolina and Clemson do end up rescheduling that a little bit later on in the season. We'll stay tuned for the details on that whenever they do become available. All that being said, great atmosphere out at Segra Park, and looked like a great atmosphere out there at Doug Kinsmore Stadium as well. Anytime these two teams get together, it's going to be a big deal regardless of if they're ranked or not. Baseball, such a big deal here in the Palmetto State, and especially when these two teams get the opportunity to lock horns. And hey, that's a Clemson team, by the way, that you could see in the postseason as well. Not the first time that's happened. And again, both these teams have high aspirations for what they're going to be able to accomplish this season. So you might get your opportunity, similar to Florida last year. You might get the opportunity to see that team again when it matters even more, in the postseason, in a regional, super regional, or something along those lines. So we'll see what ultimately ends up happening with that. But again, there's a few things to work on, trying to improve your small ball offense, especially when you have runners on, and what you're able to do there. But no reason to panic. Again, back to the drawing board, tweak a few things, and hopefully come out a little bit stronger on the other side of that with what you can do so far this season. So that was an unfortunate way to start the weekend with that loss in the extras on Saturday, and then going up there and losing in Clemson's ballpark on Sunday as well. But it was not a total wash of a weekend, because on the hardwood, plenty of excitement happening, starting off with the men's team in action taking on Florida on Saturday afternoon at Colonial F Arena. We'll dive into that. He'll let you hear from Coach Paris and some of the players as well after South Carolina puts together another impressive victory on what's been a great season so far. You're listening to The Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday afternoon here on The Game.
Leakey off the ball screen at the top of the key. Step back, long two, money. 70-68 Gamecocks. These two teams throwing haymakers at each other. What a contest. Pulling drive, has it stolen. Talon Cooper runs to the rim. Shot rejected. Michi lays it up and in.
Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you on this Monday morning, Monday afternoon, excuse me, here on the game. That was the call, very exciting call from Derek Scott on the Gamecocks Radio Network on Saturday, and what was a very, very exciting game between the Gamecocks and the Gators. Again, first ranked versus ranked matchup for the men's team out at Colonial Life Arena since 2017 when they took on the Gators in that one as well and came away with the victory. Obviously, that was the year they made their very special run to the, to the Final Four. And, Saturday, going into that game, after beating Ole Miss and Texas A&M, you felt pretty confident South Carolina had done enough to secure a spot in the NCAA tournament here in a couple weeks. And, with the opportunity to pick up another couple of big wins against Florida and Tennessee in the next couple games, as well as Mississippi State, to wrap up the season, could only further bolster the resume that South Carolina had put together at that point in time. And going out there and winning that game in the fashion that they did, again, is another feather in the cap for what has been a truly fantastic season for South Carolina men's basketball. I brought this point up earlier. I was texting with my friend, who's a big, huge college basketball fan. He was asking about Lamont Paris and his contract situation and all that kind of stuff, and if South Carolina was going to pay him this offseason, which I said I fully expect to, and they'd be dumb if they didn't, because Paris has done an incredible job in his short time here at South Carolina. But I told him, I said, this is the most fun I've ever had watching a basketball team, following a basketball team as far as college goes. And look, I went to Georgia. Everybody knows that. Georgia basketball, they won the SEC tournament in 2008 and made the tournament that way. But other than that, not a whole lot to hang their hat on as far as performances in my lifetime. So to see and be able to follow along and, obviously being able to cover this team for Lamont Paris and Company has been a lot of fun. And I'm very excited to see what they're going to do at the, not only at the SEC tournament, but the NCAA tournament, and how far this team can ultimately go. It's been a magical season, and hopefully this magic continues to ride for quite a while. And Saturday, just an incredible performance on all fronts, offensively, defensively. Michi Johnson goes out there and scores 25 points. His first back-to-back double-digit performance, believe it or not, since the beginning of conference play. So Mississippi State and Alabama, those were the first two conference games, and Michi Johnson scored in double figures in both those games and has not been able to do that since. He's kind of been riding this roller coaster of ups and downs this season, but back on track with an incredible performance on Saturday with those 25 points and 4 rebounds, as well as 3 assists. And it's not just scoring key points; it is hitting big plays at important times in the game. Here's Michi Johnson on Saturday talking about his clutch 3 in the final minutes of that game.
I knew that was a big play. I knew we needed to get something. And that's a blessing to be able to shoot the ball like that, because they don't know when I'm going to drive or they don't know when I'm going to shoot. And I just felt good. Again, my coaches really believe in me to have the ball late in the game like that. My teammates really encouraging me to be aggressive. And I just felt good. I felt confident.
And the confidence showed. Again, ends up shooting 10 of 15 from the field, 3 of 5 from the free throw line. Again, a couple of those 25 points and that huge shot with 44 seconds to go there that gave South Carolina the lead for the final time at that point, 77-74. And big-time players step up and make big-time plays. And again, it's been ups and downs this season for Michi Johnson, and that's not to say in the games where he was scoring in double figures he wasn't having an impact, because there were games where he was, rebounding well and assisting well. So it's not like he was a ghost out there in some of these games, but see him step up against a really good opponent like Florida is certainly, encouraging to see. One of the big stories of this game, too, was South Carolina and their 1-3-1 zone defense, which is something that we've seen them employ several times this season and use very effectively. And, when you look at the numbers that Florida shot in the first and second half, very comparable, very similar actually, on a lot of fronts. So it's not like it drastically shifted things in one direction for Florida's offense, but what it did was made them move around a little bit and do things a little bit differently than what they did in the first half. And here's Coach Paris talking about that after the game on Saturday.
Yeah, it did. I thought at one point we started making some baskets with at least some regularity, but then we were struggling getting stops. They were doing a good job in the ball screens. They were scoring a variety of ways in the ball screen. Sometimes with the guy that had the ball, they were pretty effective from the mid-range even during that. So I just wanted to change the complexion of what they were doing. And instead of being so geared up to ball screens and handoffs, essentially the same type action, even more difficult sometimes to defend, and make them do something different, particularly when they had two bigs in that are, don't shoot the ball great. So now you only have three guys to keep an eye on while you're out in the zone. And so, obviously, we did a good job. We got some tremendous results with it. And, it's the second time the old 1-3-1 has saved the day for the Gamecock.
And when you look at Florida and the way that they're shooting in the first half, most of their makes were coming within the vicinity of the key, so either right near the basket or even their threes were kind of at the top of the key, just beyond the arc there. But when South Carolina went to that 1-3-1 zone, it pushed them out a little bit farther to where they're having to take shots from areas maybe they weren't quite as comfortable with and kind of had to space the court a little bit. And again, their numbers overall weren't all that different, and you do run a big risk when it comes to running that 1-3-1, especially against a team like Florida that is so good at rebounding the basketball on offense because you're creating more space down there near the basket. That being said, South Carolina only surrendered one offensive rebound in the second half of that game, so they found a way to be effective despite where, again, that defense might be a little bit inefficient in that area. But perhaps the biggest stat to take away, of course, is the turnovers. South Carolina forced 8 turnovers in the second half of that game. Again, it's just the little things of making Florida uncomfortable, putting them in a little bit different situation than they've been used to up to that point, and being able to take the ball away and capitalize that on offense. And look, this team builds itself on its identity of gritty, hard-nosed type of defense, and the offense is often secondary, but on Saturday, the second half, they put together their best single-half performance of the entire season with 51 points and did it in a variety of ways. And I mentioned again, Meechie Johnson with his 25 points. Con Murray Boyles with a double-double. And by the way, great block in the final couple seconds there to help seal the win for South Carolina. But this is a team that, again, can attack you in a variety of ways, offensively and defensively. And when you think about what makes a good tournament team, that's certainly one of the qualities that comes to mind. And for a team that, doesn't necessarily have the experience in a tournament, what I've seen of them this season gives me hope that maybe they can make a decent run. Now, do I expect them to go to Final Four? Probably not. It'd be great if they did, and we'd certainly love to see them going on a magical run like they did back in 2017. But, this versatility that they show, you feel like they have a chance against anyone, and that's great. Where they're not, at one-dimensional, maybe as much as their numbers might suggest, because, again, the offensive explosion they had in the second half shows that they can do those kind of things. So just a huge win. And again, for a team and a program that was not projected to do much of anything for the season, we talk ad nauseum about 13th place projection, 14th place projection, depending on, what metrics you look at. And, Lamont Paris kind of using that as the chip on the shoulder for this team. They've stepped up to the task. They've proven everybody wrong up to this point, including many of us who didn't think they were going to maybe make that sizable amount of a jump. Not expect them to be better in year number 2, but certainly not competing for the SEC regular season crown, with 2 games to go in the regular season, which is what you set up coming up on Wednesday night with Tennessee coming to town. And what's going to be a huge matchup on national television. I'm going to have a lot of eyes on it. And, again, another opportunity to continue to bolster the resume for South Carolina in their pursuit of the NCAA tournament coming up here in a couple weeks. So, fun season, been very exciting so far. And, excited to see it continue and hopefully maybe lay claim to not only part of that SEC regular season crown, but also one of those coveted double byes in the SEC tournament coming up next week. A little bit earlier on this morning, I spoke with Jack Veltri of Gamecock Central. We dove into this basketball game and the men's team so far this season. I'll let you hear a little bit more of that conversation coming up next. It is the halftime show. We roll along here. Reminder, you can always listen to us on the 107.5 Game app and always stream us on the Game TV as well. Sponsored by Shepherd's Glass. Go to youtube.com, search the Game TV, and tune into us all day long. And again, the 107.5 Game app is available on your respective app store. And just download it and take us wherever you go, across state, across the country, across the world. You can never be without the game. My conversation with Jack Felcher from Gamecock Central on men's basketball is coming up next. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you here on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you on this Monday morning, reacting to what was a very full and busy weekend of Gamecock sports. And the man that was there to see pretty much all of it was our guy, Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central, who joins us now on the Love Chevrolet phone lines. Jack, I know you got to be a little bit exhausted this morning. One game on the hardwood on Saturday, and then 2 games on the diamond, one on Saturday and one on Sunday in the upstate of Clemson. This is a time of year where you are a very, very busy man.
Yeah, first off, thanks again for having me on. And, yeah, man, I'm back home now and glad to be home because it's not even just this weekend, man. I mean, yeah, traveled a ton, but, hey, this is just the beginning of it. And, yeah, I'm looking forward to a very, very busy next few weeks ahead, especially with this basketball team playing the way it is. But, yeah, man, it's exhausting, but totally worth it.
We'll dive into all the basketball in just a second here, but as I was just talking about in the last segment, kind of, giving overall thoughts on the Clemson series with South Carolina baseball, obviously not ideal, and you hate losing to your rival, but, when you talk about one-run games, such a thin margin for error, and, if South Carolina can work on, putting together some more hits and, playing a little bit more small ball as opposed to just focusing on the power stuff, you feel like they're going to be okay, but all in all, a good litmus test for this program this past weekend.
Yeah, it was a very good test, and we kind of knew it was going to be like this, a very, very big heavyweight kind of fight, and it definitely lived up to the hype. I mean, like you said, 2 one-run losses for South Carolina, and they came up on the short end of the stick both times. But, in hindsight, look, it's the 11th game of the year right now. I mean, they've got so much time left to go. SEC play hasn't even started yet. Obviously, they didn't hit well with runners in scoring position, or just runners on base in general. They went, I think, 4 for 37 with runners on base this entire weekend. So that's obviously got to get fixed. But look at the bright spots of it. Ethan Petrie continues to rake. I mean, he had 2 homers this weekend. Cole Messina finally broke out of his miniature slump with a homer on Sunday. And then I think the pitching staff overall did pretty well. I mean, you can't ask for much more. Obviously, you'd like Dylan Eskew and Eli Jones to give you maybe a little more length. But overall, I think the bullpen was pretty good too. Your pitching staff basically gave you a chance. It's just the offense didn't do enough things in the end. And it's not like Clemson had an incredible weekend or anything. I mean, yeah, I think it just came down to them getting one more hit, one more RBI than South Carolina did. And I mean, if it's the opposite, South Carolina's coming out on top. But it's all correctable, and I don't think I don't think this season's far from over, basically.
Again, talking to our guy, Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central. Transitioning over to the hardwood now. It was a huge matchup at Colonial Life Arena. First ranked versus ranked matchup for the men's team since, coincidentally enough, Florida back in 2017. South Carolina stepped up to the task, obviously trailed for a lot of that game. But, in a rare instance that we've seen this season, usually it is the offense that's a complement to the aggressive defense that South Carolina is playing. Played aggressive defense, but it seemed like the offense kind of took precedent in the second half there. South Carolina puts up 51 points, their best single half performance the entire season, and no surprise, that was led by Meechie Johnson.
Yeah. I think that second half was a incredible second half on both ends of the floor for South Carolina. First off, defensively, making the switch to the 1-3-1 defense completely turned the game around, defensively speaking, because Florida just had no answers when South Carolina was doing that sort of thing. And then offensively speaking, like you said, Meechie Johnson, I think we've been waiting for him to kind of get back to that level of basketball we know he can play. Obviously, he had the great game against Texas A&M, had some key buckets, the really nice assist to Zach Davis to win that game last Wednesday. But in that second half, I mean, look, he only had 4 points going into the break on Saturday. And then he goes out and scores 21 points in the second half to finish with 25 for the day. And he was money. 9 of 10 in the second half. Shooting is just about as much better than a typical Meechie Johnson experience. And he is, like I've said it multiple times, I think if him and Talon Cooper can kind of get it going again, I don't know, man. I think the sky's kind of the limit for this team because we've seen how good they can be when those two guys are playing the way they are.
One of the big talking points in the post-game presser was, of course, the 1-through-1 defense, which we've seen South Carolina employ several times this season. Broke it out once again in the second half on Saturday against Florida. And when you look at the numbers, Florida's shooting percentages and stuff didn't really change all that much. But as Coach Paris alluded to, it was really kind of putting them in a different position, making them do something different on offense. And it kind of changed where they were taking their shots from. And it proved to be effective enough because, again, South Carolina's offense picked up the slack in the second half enough for the victory.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, there wasn't a complete change in the way Florida was shooting, but I think just, again, South Carolina, when South Carolina was shooting the way it did in the second half, I mean, you're shooting, I think they shot almost 58% maybe in the second half. And look, I mean, I think we saw it a few weeks ago at the Auburn game, right? I mean, Auburn was shooting almost 60% or more than 60% the entire game, and South Carolina lost by 40. So when South Carolina is shooting almost 58% in one half, it doesn't matter what Florida does. That's going to be kind of tough to keep up with. And then you combine that with the way the defense kind of locked down a little bit, forcing a handful of turnovers there late in the second half. I mean, Florida was just doomed right there. And there's not much to do. There's not much you can do when all cylinders are kind of clicking for the South Carolina team.
Well, that now sets up, just as we would have all predicted before the season started, a heavyweight matchup coming up on Wednesday night. Tennessee coming to town for the chance to claim a share of the SEC regular season crown. South Carolina currently one game back, obviously has the one win over Tennessee earlier on in the season. I mean, we've talked about it as the season has gone along. This team has surprised us in so many ways, and now is the opportunity not only to, again, win the SEC regular season, at least a share of it, but still claim one of those coveted double buys for the SEC tournament coming up here soon as well.
I think at this point, I mean, I don't know what they really have to do to get one of those top four seeds at this point. I feel like unless they lose both these games, obviously that changes things. But I do think South Carolina is going to at least win one game this week. I think they're back on the map, kind of rolling again after they got their mojo back basically after that really tough week a few weeks ago against LSU and Auburn. But yeah, man, I mean, Wednesday is going to be insane. I think that Tennessee game a few weeks ago, I think will still be on the minds of the Volunteers, and how they go about winning that game, I think just comes down to how the guys play around Dalton Knecht. I mean, we saw it when Dalton Knecht is on, he's unguardable. It doesn't matter who you throw at him. You can throw Zach Davis at him or whoever, Colin Murray Boyles, whoever it might be. It's really hard to stop that guy. That's going to be an NBA elite player someday, in my opinion. But if you could do what you do last time, breaking down the game plan, stopping the like Ziegler, for example, other guys like that around Knecht, and make that team kind of one-dimensional, I think you have a very good chance of doing it again. And combine that with this game now being on your home floor, the fact that you were able to go into Knoxville and win that game is impressive in itself. But the fact that you have a chance to beat these guys again at home now with that crowd that's probably going to be louder than this past weekend, I think you've got a really good chance to do it. It just, like I said, it really comes down to whether or not those guys around Knecht are going to be shut down again. Personally, I think they're going to shoot a little better this time around. I just think Tennessee is kind of rolling after the Alabama game and stuff. Maybe the emotions are a little too high for them coming into this game. Who knows? I mean, I think it's just going to come down to who's kind of just, playing a little more mellow, just not worried about the bigger picture, just playing one game at a time and, one possession at a time. But I think South Carolina is in a good position to handle business on Wednesday. We'll see what happens.
A last one for you here. Got about 1 minute. Regardless of what happens on Wednesday, regardless of what happens in the SEC tournament coming up here in about a week's time, this team's going to be playing in the NCAA tournament. That is a straight fact at this point in time, and relieving to be able to say now.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt. South Carolina, look, I think at this point, I don't even know, man. I think at this point, South Carolina is a lock for the NCAA tournament. I do think they've got a really good chance to win on Wednesday, and then Mississippi State's not going to be easy either. I think they're a very good team. I mean, it's very poetic that they start SEC play at home against Mississippi State, and then they get to go on the road and end the year against the Bulldogs. So we'll see what happens. This is a huge week for South Carolina, but I think they're getting hot at the right time. And SEC tournament next week, I mean, we'll see what happens. It hasn't been kind to them lately, but I think they've got a really good chance to make a run regardless of what happens this weekend.
Well, we'll talk to you next week, setting the table for that SEC tournament, hopefully talking about at least another one or maybe two more wins for the South Carolina program then.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. Thank you again, Tyler. I really appreciate your time, man.
And that was my conversation earlier with Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central. Appreciate his insight on men's basketball, a little bit of baseball in there as well. We will come back, wrap up hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Look at me, the halftime show. I host so many shows on here, it's not even funny. We'll come back and wrap up hour number 1 of the halftime show. Also get to our Firehouse Subs text of the hour as well. It's Tyler Head rolling solo today here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head again flying solo today. Terry Ford will be back in with me tomorrow. Elijah Campbell going to jump in with me in the 2 o'clock hour. We'll talk his weekend reactions, and he's going to be hosting the post-game show today by himself from 3 until 6 as Jay is out for today as well. So, me and him, we're just the glue holding this place together, I guess, at the end of the day. Before we get to the Firehouse Subs text of the hour, I want to remind you once again about the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway going to be going on all baseball season long. As we've told you, $25 going to get added to the pot each and every game until a Gamecock hitter hits a Grand Slam. And we've come so close so many times this season. Had bases loaded situation again yesterday, if I remember correctly. Unfortunately, the Gamecocks not able to capitalize on that. But at some point, we're going to see somebody take it for all 4 runs at some point in the season. Make sure you are signed up for the 107.5 the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway, so you can be the lucky recipient of whatever that pot is at that point in time. Again, $25 every single game. Just go online to 1075thegame.com each and every week to register for your chance to win that. Speaking of baseball, we head out to the Firehouse Subs text line. Daniels texture weighs in and says, losing close games makes me so much more angry. Losing close games to Clem sucks is infuriating. And that's kind of the interesting thing when you look back at this weekend. If you lose a blowout, if you get run rolled or something like that, like similarly to when South Carolina lost to Belmont or even when Clemson lost to Kennesaw State the other weekend, you can kind of write those off a little more quickly. And I'd say get past them a little more quickly is just saying, we're having an off day, or they were doing this, we weren't doing that. And, in a weird way, getting beat by more runs like that is kind of something that you can move past, just saying, hey, we had a bad day, they had a great day, and that's kind of the end of it. But when you're talking about 2 one-run games like we saw over the weekend at Segra Park and Doug Kinsmore Stadium, then you are nitpicking everything. Because you're saying, well, if we would have done this in this situation, if this hadn't happened, if that hadn't happened, then we'd be talking about, 1 win or 2 wins or whatever it may be. And couple that with the fact that you're also playing your bitter in-state rival, that certainly does not make that, any better. But like I said a little bit earlier, I'm not pressing the panic button. I think this is still a very good team. You're going to lose games. That's going to happen. Of course, you don't want to lose to your in-state rival, but nothing South Carolina can't bounce back from. And when you look at this, it's something where, as a team, you can look at it, take a look in the mirror and say, okay, here's what we need to improve on. Here's where we need to be better. Again, their plate discipline is great. And that was once again on display over the course of the weekend with 22 free passes between being walked and being hit by pitches. Again, shout out to Gavin Cassis. I know he's a little bit sore waking up this morning, but South Carolina was good at getting people on base and had a decent amount of hits too. It's just not being able to capitalize when you have those guys on base and being able to move them around in those small ball type of situations, singles, doubles, maybe in the occasional triple as well. It's great to have power. It's great to be able to hit home runs, but similarly to teams that wrap up their entire identity in shooting the 3 in basketball. When you live by the 3, you die by the 3. And in baseball, when you live by power, sometimes you die by power, because if you go up against a pitcher or pitching staff that is not allowing any of those big balls to be hit, then you are certainly going to struggle. And again, great for Petrie. Got his 2 home runs over the weekend, including, and to clear this up, I know there were some people asking the questions about this. Coming away from the game, he hits the home run yesterday, and it was in the 9th inning, and it looked like he had gotten ejected from the game as he's running by the third baseman. He said something to him, and the umpire at third base and then the umpire at home plate as well kind of convened and went over and had a conversation with Kingston, and I believe Petrie as well, and there was confusion on if he'd gotten tossed from the game or not. And listening to Stewart and Derek in the post game, it sounds like it was more of just a warning. Now, again, that was the end of the game anyway. South Carolina did not take the field, or excuse me, Petrie was not ejected from the game, and obviously didn't get a chance to come out there and bat again. So I don't think it ended up really having that big of an impact anyway, but I believe, if you're wanting to be specific about it, I believe he only got a warning in that situation. He was not formally ejected. But again, in a rivalry game, and look, there was a lot of back and forth, guys chirping at each other, gestures, motions, all that kind of stuff. And again, I thought Gavin Cassis might end up charging the mound when he got hit by that third pitch, but everybody for the most part kept pretty cool heads. But a lot of high intensity, a lot of high emotions when you're playing these type of rivalry games. And again, Petrie hitting a home run that unfortunately did not give them the lead, only drew them a little bit closer, but just not quite enough there for South Carolina. And again, at least just got a talking to from the umpiring staff on keeping those emotions in check. And again, that's something you just kind of come to expect when it comes to these kind of rivalry series. But back to the drawing board. Next game is tomorrow night against Citadel, 6:30. First pitch. Pregame coverage for that's actually going to start at our sister station, ESPN 1320 WISW, 6:15. Pregame coverage, 6:30. First pitch, as we're going to have Carolina Calls with Coach Paris going on here on the game. Of course, the men's basketball team in action once again coming up on Wednesday night as they take on Tennessee again for the top spot in the SEC. So plenty of baseball left to be played for Coach Kingston's crew, as it's a very long season. Unfortunately, not going to get the nod in the Palmetto Series this year, but hopefully maybe you'll get to see this Clemson team down the line and enact some revenge in the postseason at some point. 1 hour down, 2 more hours to go. It's football, and more football coming up in the 1 o'clock hour right here on the Halftime Show. Tyler Head flying solo with you here on your Monday on The Game.
Yeah, Coach Beamer, just a great guy. Wanted to play for somebody like that. The university, the fan base, everything, the conference. I mean, closest thing to the NFL. Wanted to be ready for this step. And, Coach Dow Loggins, when he came in 2023, I mean, that took my game to the next level, I felt like. So it was awesome.
Welcome back in hour number 2 of the halftime show. It is Tyler Head along with you. Terry Ford will be back in studio with me here tomorrow as he is taking today off. That, of course, was the voice of Spencer Rattler this past weekend out at the NFL Combine as he's getting set to take his career to the next level with the draft coming up here in a couple months. But this past week, all focus was on the Combine and what Spencer Rattler's performance was going to be to hopefully potentially elevate him a little bit more in the eyes of the NFL scouts and see where he can ultimately end up being selected in that draft process. He, of course, was one of 5 Gamecocks out there at the Combine. He joined Xavier Legette, Trey Knox, Marcellus Dial, and Nick Gargiulo out there, all guys with aspirations of playing at the next level. And, we talked about Rattler, and of course, quarterback, very important, the most important position on the field. There's a lot of focus going to be on him, but we talked about Rattler having the opportunity to really shine, especially last week in the throwing when you didn't have guys like Caleb Williams and Drake May and so on and so forth taking the opportunity to throw, because Spencer Rattler, we've seen the arm strength from his time here at South Carolina. He can spin the pill like nobody's business. Good arm, very good pocket presence, and that's the kind of stuff that obviously the scouts at the next level want to see. And from all reports and indications and the clips that I saw, it looked like Spencer Rattler did a very good job when it came to the throwing part of it, and we'll see how much that elevates his draft stock, as we get closer and closer to draft time. But just as importantly for Spencer Rattler is not only showing people what he has, but also shaking these narratives that surround him and have surrounded him for the past couple of years of his college career. And I go back to, the article that I referenced last week from USA Today when they talked about, guys that had the most to gain from being at the NFL Combine, and Spencer Rattler was at the top of their list. And I agreed with most everything that they said in that regard. But the one thing that really stuck out to me that almost bothered me to a degree was them talking about Spencer Rattler's, erraticness and poor decision making and all that kind of stuff, putting the ball in harm's way. And if we're talking about Spencer Rattler from 2 years ago, then yeah, absolutely, I agree. That was what his character in college football was kind of known as. A guy, hey, great arm strength, very athletic, but man, just throws up some of those balls that you wonder why he did that, and you scratch your head, especially after they get intercepted. And I'll point to the same stat that I brought up last week. In 2022, his first season at South Carolina, Spencer Rattler had 22 turnover-worthy plays. So that is plays that even if it doesn't get picked off, even if your receiver catches it in triple coverage and runs it in for a touchdown, that still counts as a turnover-worthy play because you put the ball in harm's way. 22 of those in 2022, 11 this past year. Cut that number in half. And when you go back and pick apart when some of Spencer Rattler's interceptions happened, like late in the game against Georgia, he was just trying to make a play. And in a little bit desperation mode, kind of running around for his life a little bit, heaving it up there. So, it's not a mistake he was making on a consistent basis. And again, that works out to less than one of those throws per game. And I think that is a, perfect indicator of the maturity that Spencer Rattler's had as a quarterback in his time at South Carolina, and whether that just be, playing more football, whether that be his time with Dow Loggins and how that helped him, or just the caliber of talent that he had around him as far as weapons on offense, like Xavier Legette that helped him out in that regard. But regardless, Spencer Rattler has taken strides forward in his time at South Carolina to hopefully shake some of those narratives. And really, when the scouts of the teams individually get down and break down his film and kind of look at his numbers, hopefully they'll see that, because I don't think that's something that should still be following Spencer Rattler's, just similarly to the dumb stuff from the Netflix documentary when he was in high school. We've talked about that until we're blue in the face. And anytime people brings up, character issues, and he's not a good leader, and, he's self-centered and blah, 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 we here in Columbia know that's not the case anymore. We've seen him in the press conferences. He's been here in our various studios on various editions of the Garnet Trust Hour and the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, and we've seen that maturity. He's no longer that 17-year-old kid that was saying, whatever came to his mind when he was, a senior in high school, being touted as, the best player in the country, 5 stars and all that kind of stuff. He's matured, and his life experiences in college football have certainly brought him a long way, and I'm very excited to see what he's going to do at the next level. I think, again, at best, maybe he sneaks his way into the back half of the second round. All the projections as of right now kind of have him listed in that, third round area. And again, it's all dependent on team needs and, what teams look at him and say, hey, he can be our backup quarterback. I certainly don't think anybody's drafting him to start as a day one guy, but this is something that I brought up plenty of times before. We look at the NFL over the past couple seasons. This year, more quarterbacks started than any other year in NFL history, and that also helps because you're playing extra games, 17-game season, but so many guys going down with injuries, so many starting quarterbacks that weren't performing and getting replaced and all that kind of stuff. You have to be ready at all times, and you never know which backup quarterback is going to get their next opportunity to start. So Spencer Rattler may not be drafted as some team's starting quarterback, but there's a very high chance that he could still see the field in some kind of capacity even as a rookie. And I think whenever that happens, whatever team he goes to, he's going to be ready. He's going to be ready for that challenge and should hopefully thrive in that situation as well. So we'll see where they ultimately end up selecting him. He joins Xavier Legette as a couple of South Carolina Gamecocks that were named to ESPN's list of rising talents, top risers after the NFL Combine. I'll read you the quick synopsis on Spencer Rattler real quick. They said Rattler has an effortless throwing motion, and the ball came out of his hand with accuracy at 6 feet and 211 pounds. He consistently showed that he can control the ball with touch, but also crank up the velocity when necessary, making multiple standout passes. Rattler is my favorite development option at the position and could be picked up as high as the third round. There's still work to do with his game, but he has the traits that could eventually lead him to the spot starter role or more in the pros. So again, high regard for Spencer Rattler, and as we expected, a lot of people impressed when he finally got out there and was able to throw the ball around a little bit. Yeah, I think it's just football IQ is really, really strong as well, and that's kind of one of those things when it's getting into these individual meetings with teams and doing the whiteboard work and being given scenarios and stuff like that to kind of tell them how he'd adjust based on the defense and what kind of stuff he'd bring to the line of scrimmage. I think that's where he's really going to thrive. And again, smart guy, played a lot of football in college, has overcome a lot of adversity as well. He was a guy that when he came to South Carolina was seen as damaged goods by a lot of people and was able to rebound that. And while, yes, a 13-12 record is not what we were hoping for with his time here as a Gamecock, but think about what that record for the team would be if he wasn't the starting quarterback. Probably a whole lot worse. He made, chicken salad out of chicken in his time here at South Carolina, and I think we're all very excited to see what he's going to be able to do at the next level. As I mentioned, Xavier Legette also on that list of top risers on ESPN from the Combine over the weekend. Their synopsis of Legette says, Legette got knocked for a slow start to the week when we were at the Senior Bowl. I dropped him outside my top 50 after practices didn't show the same burst as his game tape did, and he measured at 6'1" after being listed at 6'3". Legette is back, though, a 4.39 40-yard dash, matches the tape and makes me think the early Senior Bowl struggles were just Legette shaking off the rust and of the postseason. Testing as well as he did, 48 inches in the vertical and 10.6 in the broad jump at 221 pounds, has him climbing back up on the board and looks like a true first rounder. And that's, again, something that I think we've all believed about Xavier Legette. And watching him here at South Carolina, just a physical specimen, a freak of an athlete, and what he's able to do, getting high-pointed balls, being able to go out there and make plays happen, with his feet when he gets the ball in space, and those long touchdown runs that we've seen him do several times this past season. The Senior Bowl thing knocked him down in a lot of people's minds with maybe not putting his best performance there. I don't think it was as bad as some people make it out to be, but regardless, sounds like he's definitely rebounded with his performance out there at the NFL Combine. And yes, the 4.39 40 is not what Xavier Worthy ran, but at the end of the day, the 40-yard dash is not the end-all, end-all, be-all at, it does also rely on what you're able to do with pads and helmet on as well. And I think Xavier Legette, very smart, very good football player. And, man, it'd be so cool to see him be able to sneak maybe into the back half of that first round. This is a very heavy wide receiver draft class this year, and obviously going up against the likes of Marvin Harrison and Roma Dunze and guys like that. So he's likely going to be maybe the 7th, 8th wide receiver off the board, but that still means he can go in the first round. Again, it just really depends on team needs and where he is positioned when whoever ends up taking him ultimately does. Now, the benefit of going late in the first round, maybe end up in a team with already a good situation like Kansas City or or Philadelphia or something like that. One that you're not going to a place like Carolina where you're having to kind of start from the bottom and hopefully work your way up as an organization. So I think we're all excited to see what Xavier Legette is going to be able to do at the at the next level, as well as he and Spencer Rattler should hear their names called within the first half of the NFL Combine. We'll see what happens as far as Trey Knox, went out there, put up pretty solid numbers as far as, tight ends goes. He's somebody that maybe could factor into one of those later rounds in the draft. Guys like Gargiulo and Marcellus Dial, we'll see. They ended up putting up, decent numbers themselves. For Nick Gargiulo, he's somebody that is obviously going to be very, benefited by the whiteboard stuff as well and just individually meeting with teams. I mean, the dude went to freaking Yale, for crying out loud. He's a smart guy, and his football knowledge is truly very, very high. So I think he's going to impress a lot of those teams when, again, he gets to sit down with them and, have those conversations and allow them to kind of pick his brain a little bit in reference to what he knows and, what he can bring to their individual organizations. Thankfully, at least I didn't see anything. None of the Gamecock guys at the Combine were talking about flat earth or, thinking they could land planes or anything like that where, that might raise some red flags from some of these teams in regards to maybe drafting them where they thought that they possibly could. But, again, a couple more months to go until the draft. These guys will continue their individual workouts. Got Pro Day coming up here in a couple weeks here at South Carolina to see these guys continue to put in some work, which will be really, really cool to see. And hopefully they all find their way onto NFL rosters. Again, a guy like Gargiulo may end up being an undrafted free agent that may have to really grind his way and work his way up. So we will, we'll see what he ultimately, what these guys ultimately end up doing when it comes to getting drafted. Continue the conversation on college football as there are a litany of rule changes that are on the docket for the 2024 season as college football continues to evolve in front of our very eyes. I'll dive into some of those proposed rule changes and how it could affect what you're seeing on Saturdays this upcoming fall, all coming up. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head going with you until 3, flying solo. Terry Ford will be back in with me tomorrow here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head flying solo with you up till 2. Elijah's going to jump in with me for the 2 o'clock hour. We'll hit some of the headlines coming up at 2, including a very, very big name in the NFL ultimately deciding to retire. We'll also hit some of what's going on with the AP poll as those numbers have been released, or new rankings have been released for both the men and the women. And we'll reset where South Carolina is in regards to both of those. Of course, greatest day in the history of the world coming up at 2:30 as well. Were you hoping that college football was going to look even more like the NFL? Well, you may be getting that wish coming true because the NFL Rules Committee is proposing a couple different rules that would once again draw college football a little bit closer to its professional counterpart. Now, one rule that is very likely to be enacted that I don't think anybody is necessarily opposed to is helmet communication. Obviously, the conversation around this really ramped up this past season with the whole Michigan Connor Stallions thing and stealing signs and the nefarious, links that Michigan went to allegedly, or not allegedly, they did steal signs from their opponents, by going in person and video recordings and all that kind of stuff. It really got a lot of people speaking up about helmet technology in college football, something that's been in the NFL for a very, very long time. And one of those things when, you ask people in college football, well, why didn't you do this in college? It was just kind of just because we've always done the signs and signals this way. And I don't think anybody necessarily saw the need to change it at any point. And look for coaches, because again, I'll go back to what I said when the whole Stallions thing was going on. Every program steals signs. Every program is doing what they can to try and figure out what the other team is calling, during their games and trying to get ahead of them and all that kind of stuff. What Michigan did was take it to the next level by, again, buying tickets to games that, Michigan wasn't even a part of and trying to figure out Penn State or Ohio State signs or whatever it may be. That's where you cross the line. And it, again, really kind of pushed the conversation of the helmet technology forward quite a bit. We saw some of the bowl games utilizing a little bit. And look, for a lot of these FBS programs, Power 5, even some Group 5 schools, I don't think it's that big of a financial undertaking to do something like this. And again, when you're talking about one player on offense, one player on defense, just being looped into the headset communication of what the coaches already have, and I'm not going to pretend to know the number figure here, and yes, it's easier to spend other people's money compared to your own, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's this drastic thing where, oh no, all these programs can't afford it, and it's such a financial undertaking or whatever it may be. Like, I feel like there's going to be a pretty smooth transition here. And again, it just kind of streamlines the whole process. And from what I've read, it's not going to take away signs and signals being used on the sidelines. It'll just maybe not put as much of an emphasis on them. And of course, if your helmet communication goes out for some reason, you can always rely on those things, as well. And similar to the NFL, the proposal would be that the communication between the coach and the player on the field would stop either 15 seconds to go on the play clock or when the ball is snapped. So again, very similarly to what the NFL, already does. So again, I don't think this is something you're really even going to even notice. They'll probably talk about it in the first couple of weeks of, the broadcasting college football, but by week 3, 4, 5, you're going to forget that it happens unless you're just so intent on watching the signs being made on the sidelines and whatever those silly, cards that programs put up with, SpongeBob, a bowling pin, and, a picture of a turkey sandwich or whatever it may be. But you get the point. I don't think this drastically changes too much of college football at the end of the day. Similarly, bringing tablet technology to the sidelines, something that's been in the NFL for a while now. They have the little Microsoft Surface tablets where they can go back and review game film and situations and scenarios and all that kind of stuff. That also seems to be making its way into college football, where programs will be able to have up to 18 on the sidelines to be able to review the film from situations and all that kind of stuff. For the longest time, they would have the printed sheets that they would bring down the sideline to take a look at formations and things that the defenses or offenses were doing and kind of adjust their game plans accordingly. So this kind of streamlines a little bit more. Again, we have the technology. I don't think this is a crazy financial undertaking to make this kind of thing available. And again, just kind of makes sense at the end of the day. So I'm not really opposed to either one of these rule changes. They're fine. And again, I think it's just two things that at the end of the day, you're not going to notice a whole lot once we get into the thick of the season. One thing you are going to notice is another stoppage in play, because there is also a push for a 2-minute warning in college football. Last season, of course, the controversial rule change was the no longer stopping the clock on first downs outside of the final 2 minutes of a half, which has been a staple of college football since, I want to say, the mid-'70s is when they made that rule change. And one of the biggest differences between college football and the NFL is that clock stopping, which, again, affects your strategy, affects how you call plays, and affects the flow of the game as well. And I think so many of us, yes, college football games routinely were taking about 3.5 hours. I really don't know many people that were complaining because, especially here in the SEC, we're locked in and engaged regardless. We don't care if it takes 2 hours, 5 hours, or 7 hours. We're going to watch the game regardless. So I don't think there was this outcry of wanting a 10 to 12 less plays in college football games, which is what we ended up getting. The thing is, though, despite having that extra runtime on the clock, games really didn't change that much in terms of their total runtime. You trimmed off a few minutes of the total runs as far as the average goes. But again, when you're talking about knocking out, 10 to 15 plays per game, you expected something a little bit more drastic. But the reason it's not drastic is because guess what? The TV networks just started running more commercials and adding more commercials into their already pretty long commercial breaks. And that's exactly the reason why something like this is going to happen too. It's another set stoppage of time within a game. Similarly to the NFL, when it hits the 2-minute warning, guess what? I think outside of like Amazon Prime, I think they don't go to commercial. But again, they're already kind of a private streaming thing anyway, so they don't have necessarily the same means of commercials as your traditional broadcast. But you best believe when you're watching South Carolina play Oklahoma this year and it hits 2 minutes to go before halftime or 2 minutes to go in the game, they're going to pop to another commercial break that's going to last 2, 3, 4 minutes, however long it is, as another way to build in commercials. Again, at the end of the day, the ESPN, the broadcasters are finding more ways to squeeze more commercial times into these games, which again is making them take the same amount of time just with less plays that they had in years past. But as much as we hate it, and look, we were all complaining about the amount of commercials and commercial breaks being taken this past year in college football because it was definitely felt like a ridiculous amount over the course of each and every game. This is ESPN's way of, making their money back. They just paid a boatload of money for rights to continue to broadcast the college football playoff through 2031. And guess what? That money doesn't grow on trees. They have to make that money back when it comes to revenue and advertising, and this is their way of doing that. And again, ESPN controls almost all the media rights in college football now, save for, what Fox and now CBS have with, with the Big Ten. And then, NBC has its deal with Notre Dame. But, I'd say 90% of the games are all shown on ESPN, and I imagine they were very much involved in this process of getting this kind of extra stoppage put in there where they can guarantee another TV timeout over the course of a game, which again I think is just going to slow the game down a little bit more. And I would not be surprised if the numbers or the number of minutes per game average would likely maybe shoot back up to what it was back in 2022 with these 2 additional stoppages within the game. Now, you're still going to have the clock stopping on first down within the final 2 minutes, where I'm glad they at least added that element into the game and didn't take it away completely. But, it is weird to have 2 different sets of rules depending on what minute is on the clock. But again, this is college football continuing to change from, both the off-the-field standpoint in terms of the structure of the college football playoff and conference realignment and all that kind of stuff. Now we're really getting into the on-the-field stuff. And I say this all the time, at the end of the day, as long as the game, the 60 minutes played between the white lines looks the same, you're going to continue to keep your same audience of college football. But the more and more you keep tweaking it, you are running that risk of maybe running some people off. Now, do people stop watching because suddenly there's 2 more stoppages in the game? They don't. People will complain about it, but they're not going to stop watching. But we are kind of losing the charm a little bit of college football being drastically different than the NFL because, it is. It's a different game, different types of offenses, that kind of stuff. But at least as far as the clock rules go, almost identically similar to what we see on Sundays with the NFL, which is unfortunate to see. Again, will we get over it? Yeah. Will we continue to watch these games all day on Saturdays? Yeah. But we don't have to be happy about it. This can be our old man yelling at cloud situation if you want it to be that. So changes are coming to college football as they will each and every year. And this year looks like going to get a 2-minute warning to go along with our rule changes as far as the clock goes from last year. If you're upset about that, let me know. 803-404-6100 for the Firehouse Subs text line. I would certainly love to know your thoughts on that. Speaking of changes, the NCAA continues to lose power. In fact, they are taking a step back on some of their enforcement and some of their investigations as well. We'll talk about that and the latest on their court case with the University of Tennessee as football, and more football rolls along here in the 1 o'clock hour. It is the Halftime Show. I'm Tyler Head here on The Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head again. Flying solo with you on this Monday afternoon now. Terry Ford will be back in with me tomorrow. Elijah Campbell chat with me in the 2 o'clock hour as we'll kind of bridge the gap between the halftime show and the post-game show as he's flying solo himself from 3 until 6 with Jay being out today as well. We'll dive into plenty again of what happened over the weekend with Gamecock sports. But football continuing to roll on here in the 1 o'clock hour. And this is football related because it kind of started with football, but the NCAA versus Tennessee/Virginia case has been so very fascinating, and we go back to last week where the court ruled in favor against the NCAA, or ruled in favor of Tennessee and Virginia and their respective attorney generals' cases brought against the NCAA, which was another knock at the NCAA and the power that they try to yield. From the standpoint of, trying to contain NIL and what they believe the rules to be. Unfortunately for them, the courts continue to say, no, you're violating antitrust. At the end of the day, that is going to continue to ding the NCAA seemingly at every turn. Certainly every time they get drug into the courtroom, that ends up going the other way. But you remember a couple months back where the NCAA said, hey, country, we're putting you on notice. All teams around college sports, college football is probably going to be at the forefront of that, but all college sports saying we are cracking down on NIL violations, and we're going to make you feel our wrath. We had the Florida State thing a while back, where they levied some pretty heavy penalties on them based on the Marius Mims situation a couple seasons ago where, the offensive coordinator drove him to a meeting with the collective. NCAA saying, can't do that. They're investigating Florida. Obviously they started looking into Tennessee, which sparked this whole thing. And there were apparently many other schools on their list that they were coming after in the near future and make them feel that wrath of the NCAA and the iron fist that they're still trying to yield. Well, Friday, things changed a little bit. NCAA puts on hold NIL investigations in wake of this trial ruling with the states of Tennessee and Virginia, as once again the NCAA sees more of its power slipping farther and farther away as they've tried to wrangle this wild animal that has been NIL, which again, they're the ones that created the wild animal in the first place with no parameters, so they've allowed it to run free. And I think they're looking at their power continuing to slip away more and more and more. Because now, as a result of this ruling, the NILs, collectives will have the opportunity to communicate with transfer portal players, high school recruits, all these prospects that potentially come to your respective school and play for your team. You can now have these conversations about what market value is, about what you can bring to the table, about what you can offer them to come to respective schools. Does that make this pay for play? Yes, it absolutely does. But we're also not naive to think this wasn't already happening to begin with. While yes, it maybe not have been the straight sit down with the collective at a table and hammer out a deal type of thing. There are back channels to this and text messages and emails and, saying, hey, here's what so-and-so told me about what you can make at this school and blah, 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 blah. There were ways around this kind of thing. And we're not stupid to sit here and just plug our ears and think that, everybody was just following these rules and nobody was doing these things. Everybody was doing these things. That was the nature of the business. And it's one of those things that if you're not doing it, guess what? Other programs around the country are doing it and probably taking your players in the process. So everybody was essentially breaking these rules, which now we know are no longer breaking rules because guess what? It violates antitrust laws if you are telling players, prospective prospects or transfer portal players that they can't go out and seek their market value when looking at the schools they want to go to. And I thought Andy Staples brought up a really good point when talking about the ruling of this case, last week in his show on 3. It's very much like where you say, okay, I've got 3 job options, but I can't find out any of the salaries until I take one of the jobs. So you take job B, find out, oh, it's $30,000. Well, that's not great, especially when you find out job A was going to give you $100,000, but you had no way of knowing that until you went into your first day of whatever job you ended up choosing. So again, that violates antitrust, as everything that the NCAA seemingly tries to do does at the end of the day. So again, that puts more power back in the hands of players, back in the hands of collectives, and back in the hands of universities as well. And I thought it was very interesting in the wake of this on Friday, the University of Tennessee is creating a nonprofit fund to position itself to potentially pay the athletes, seemingly directly from the school, should college sports end up coming to that, which I do believe we're probably not far away. Now, this is very much in line with the proposal that, funny enough, NCAA President Charlie Baker, who's only been on the job for not even a year now at this point in time, had proposed about these super conferences and saying, we'll take the teams that can meet this the programs that can meet this financial goal and move them into this upper echelon of college sports, specifically college football, and allow them to have their athletes as as employees at the end of the day, and allow them to bargain and all that kind of stuff, and be able to pay pretty much directly by the school, let's say $100,000 or something like that. Now, again, there's a lot of red tape that needs to be worked out between now and then to figure out how to exactly make that work. But Tennessee is, again, one of the first schools, and I'm sure there's going to be more following in line very quickly after what happened here with the NCAA ruling in court. They're going to put themselves in a similar position. And, we could see this transition sooner rather than later in terms of this giant shift in college football. I saw a clip from our sister station, Jocks FM, out in Birmingham, and McElroy and Kubelik in the morning last week had on Trent Dilfer, and he was talking about this kind of thing. And he, of course, is the head coach at UAB, which is in the group of five. But, we always bring up this kind of split of college football, saying eventually the powers that be, the high-ranking powers of college football, the SEC, the Big Ten, and whatever ACC and Big 12 schools can tag along as well, are eventually probably going to break off and do their own thing compared to what we've been doing with the NCAA for so many years. And it really seems like we are finally on the doorstep of that kind of thing happening, especially if you talk about players being treated as employees by their respective universities. Now, again, it's easier said than done, and there's a lot of logistics that have to be worked out to make this thing come to fruition, but it really feels like we are knocking on the door of this finally happening. And Trent Dilfer put a timeline on it of about 18 months. And it really seems like that is a realistic possibility, especially with how fast things have been working. With every time something gets stricken down in court with the NCAA, that puts more power again back in the hands of the athletes, back in the hands of the schools, and back in the hands of collectives. And as they continue to gain more power and continue to have more influence on how NIL works and what they can do with it, I think it's going to continue to evolve into, again, what we talked about, eventually becoming a employee-based system with they wouldn't really be student athletes at that point in time, but whatever we're going to end up calling the athletes at that point in time, just professional athletes, I guess, because they'd be getting paid to play their respective sports. And with that, let's say that the bulk of their salary does come from the school, and we'll put a hard number of $100,000 out there. Say every scholarship Division I football player in this upper echelon of college football is going to make $100,000. Well, that kind of brings NIL back into what it was originally intended to be. NIL was not supposed to be the payment system of college football, where coaches were having to go out there and beg their common everyday fans, hey, that $20 in your purse, we need you to put that towards the collective because we need all the money we can to be able to compete. Now collectives are still going to play a part in college football, should this new model come to be at some point in time, but it'd be more of the lesser side of things, saying, okay, well, this player's already making $100,000, but we want to, have him be a part of this event or that event or this sponsor or that sponsor and pay him X amount of dollars in addition to what he's already making. So not making it the only means of these players getting paid by their respective schools, but an additional add-on to what they would already be making. Again, a lot easier said than done, but we are certainly trending in that direction, as this NIL ride has certainly felt like a roller coaster, and I feel like we have not even hit the bumpiest part of the ride yet, or the fastest part of the ride. That certainly seems like it's coming over the hill sooner rather than later as the landscape of college sports continues to change. But at the end of the day, again, you look back to the NCAA, and they can't blame anybody but themselves with these kind of things happening, because they've continued to shoot themselves in the foot in trying to enforce things that, again, violate antitrust acts at the end of the day, which is illegal, and the reason we're in this whole situation in the first place. So something to keep an eye on as it continues to evolve, as college sports, as we know it, continues to change before our very eyes. We'll come back, wrap up hour number 2, get your Firehouse Subs text of the hour as well. It is the halftime show. I'm Tyler Head, flying solo. Elijah Campbell jumping here with me in the 2 o'clock hour here on The Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head flying solo for next couple of minutes. Elijah Campbell jumping with me in 2 o'clock hour. We'll hit some of the headlines. Again, pretty big name retiring in the NFL. Also the latest in regards to the men and women and where they sit in the new AP polls released a little bit earlier on this afternoon. But it is indeed time for the Firehouse Subs text of the hour. And we'll continue on the trend of this last conversation regarding the NCAA and, its NIL and stepping back from its investigations, as well as Tennessee opening up their nonprofit fund to potentially pay athletes directly down the line. Jeff weighs in and says, once the players are employees, can we expect to see them not be required to be students? That seems to be all that is left to have it turn into a developmental league for the NFL. And that's a really, really good question. Again, every day it seems like the landscape of this is changing. And do I think we are getting closer and closer to a collective bargaining agreement? Absolutely. And we had Pete Nakos on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs one day last week. I think it may have been Thursday. Just kind of discuss everything up to that point that had been done in regards to the changing landscape of NIL. And I asked him directly how close we were to this CBA potentially happening with college athletes. And he didn't put a timetable on it, but he said we're pretty darn close. And I certainly agree with him because, again, the NCAA continues to lose power and the institutions, the players, and the collectives continue to gain power. And again, if you want to make them employees at the end of the day, you're going to have to all sit down at the table together, collectively bargain, hammer out, rights and, unions and all that kind of stuff, and what the proper financial model of college sports, should ultimately be. And if it gets to that point, do scholarships go away? Is that still a thing? Like, how does all that work? Are you signing a contract instead of signing a national letter of intent? There's certainly a lot of unanswered questions to how all this would work exactly. But again, I think we're going to get there sooner rather than later. And if that becomes the case, I think as a representative of the school, there's got to be a student element of it to some point anyway. Like, I don't think you're just going to be able to play college football without being enrolled in the university. But it could be one of those things where, I don't know, maybe you don't have to fulfill 3 years of classes to play college football for 3 or 4 years or whatever it may be. And maybe it's just, okay, you get to this certain number of credit hours or something like that. And then you don't have to worry about classes anymore. And, because at that point in time, you're pulling down a salary. Let's be conservative and say it's like $50,000 per season or something like that for a college football player when they become employees. Like, that's still a salary that a lot of us probably would love to have ourselves. And if that's happening, do they need to worry about school? I don't know. Again, that's kind of one of the unintended consequences at the end of the day of these kind of things starting to change is, what does the academic side of it mean for college football players? I remember and college athletes as a whole, but mainly we're talking about college football. I remember a conversation I had a couple years back with a guy that big into college football and was talking about something he had heard where, you kind of allow these student athletes to major in their respective sports. So if I'm a football player and I know that I'm probably going to go to the next level anyway, why can't I just major in football? Now, is that the best career advice? We're saying because you can obviously go to the NFL and get hurt or something like that and not have a viable degree to fall back on. But if your only objective is to come to college to play football and you have no interest in academics, well, wouldn't you rather have somebody in that respective class that the athlete's taking up that actually wants to be there as opposed to the athlete that's just going through the motions and trying to earn enough grades to get on the field? I don't know. So again, it's a lot of unintended consequences, a lot of conversations that still have to be had and hammered out in regards to figuring out what you're going to do with the athlete, with the student part of being a student athlete, because again, once you start paying them, they are no longer student athletes. They are just employees at that point in time. And again, I feel like to represent the university, you got to be tied to it some kind of way. As far as being a student goes, and you would still have the regimen of, okay, you have to be 3 years out of high school to be able to go to the NFL. But I don't know. It's a good question. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. And it's just one of the many things to ponder in terms of the future landscape of not only college football, but college sports in general in terms of what this is ultimately going to look like. And I get it. Many of you probably don't love the idea of this kind of thing happening. And I'm not necessarily saying, it's going to be all for the best. I think there's, as I talk about so much, unintended consequences to any kind of rule change. And I'm sure with student athletes becoming employees at some point down the line, there's going to be a big issue with that we don't foresee coming. That's going to cause some serious problems in the landscape of college sports. But it's one of those things you're just going to have to unfortunately navigate once you ultimately end up getting there, and kind of see how you adjust to that and make rule changes, because of that. But definitely kind of venturing out into the unknown in the world of college sports. So buckle up. It's probably going to be a very bumpy ride. And again, a lot of things going to have to be learned in the process. But, it is kind of wild to think that, NIL only became a thing not even 3 years ago in the summer of 2021. And here we are in spring of 2024 already talking about being on the footsteps of student athletes becoming employees of the university, potentially in the very near future. Again, you don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. I'm just letting you know it's probably going to be coming. So buckle up and get ready for whatever bumps may come along the way. That'll do it for hour number 2 here of the Extra Point. We will have Elijah Campbell joining me in the next hour. We'll hit some of the headlines, talk about what's going on in the world of sports, of course, the greatest day in the history of the world as well. Coming up at 2:30, we'll look back on the history in sports on this particular day and whatever else comes to mind as well. It is the Extra Point. It's the halftime show. Excuse me. I host a lot of shows on this network. Please forgive me. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head. One more hour to go here on The Game. Welcome back in. Hour number 3. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you. Elijah Campbell doing his best Terry Ford impersonation, showing up just a smidge after the top of the hour. But that's okay. He's hanging out with me for the next hour before he takes the reins from 3 until 6, flying solo by himself. You know, Elijah, I made the analogy a little bit earlier that I think you and I are the glue of this station because both Terry and Jay are out, and they basically just said, all right, you guys handle the final 6 hours by yourself. Good luck.
That's right. See, we are proving ourselves to be more valuable than I think we give ourselves credit for. We mark today, March 4th, 2024. It is the 4th, right? It is, yeah.
Yes.
That we have truly proven our worth here. So this is a good day for us. We're the winners of today.
That's right. I'm definitely going to bring this up in our next round of negotiations. We're figuring out our very lucrative radio contracts because, you know, people in this industry, we make so much money, right?
Exactly, yes. That's why we come in here, wearing 3-piece suits and not Nike dry fit shirts.
I'm wearing a free hat that I got, a pullover that my mom bought for me, and jeans that I'm pretty sure I've had for at least the past 5 to 6 years. So, yeah, I'm definitely rolling high dollar here with my choice of apparel.
You want to know what the most radio thing in the world is?
Sure.
It's that me and you are both wearing hats right now that we got for free because we work at a radio station.
That is 100% the truth. I have my MRN hat on. Well, I can't. What does yours say? I can't read it.
Oh, this one's a Peak Drift hat.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
That our friend Jason Snyder gave us when we did the post game show from
Nice.
Peak Drift, previewing the Vanderbilt game, and it's become a go-to. All my free hats I get on these remotes are definitely put in the rotation.
See, I put the president out there, and I told Terry this the other day. I'm a sucker for a lot of free things, but you give me a free hat, and I will do whatever you ask of me. I'll go wherever you need me to go. I love a free hat. I have an entire bin full of them, and I'll never complain about getting one. I don't care what it says.
Oh, yeah. You want me to endorse a product? Give me a free hat.
That's right.
I'm a hat guy. I love wearing hats. Give me a free hat. I will be a walking billboard for you.
And here's the thing. With our Game TV setup, thanks to our friends over at Shepherd's Glass, you give us a hat with your company on it, boom, there's your advertising right there.
And I'm wearing it. I'll absolutely wear it. So you know what, Peak Drift, congrats. This is extra free advertisement.
There you go.
Just from giving me a hat.
Absolutely. We appreciate all of our partners, Peak Drift Brewing, MRN as well, for the free hats, if nothing else. It's time to hit the 2 o'clock headlines, and we'll kind of wrap this into what was a very, very busy sports weekend for all of us. You were out there, at the 2 basketball games at Colonial Life Arena. Saw a huge win for the men on Saturday, taking down what was at the time at number 24 Florida, and that was good enough to move South Carolina up just one spot in the AP poll to number 17, but nevertheless, still, and, I love the fact that, 3-4 weeks ago, we were like, hey, when's South Carolina get ranked? Are they going to be in the top 25? Are they going to be in the top 25? Now it's foregone conclusion. This team is a solid top 25 team where you're not even like as excited when the rankings come out. You're like, they moved up 1. That's cool.
To the point where I almost forgot that it's Monday and the AP rankings came back out.
That's right.
Whereas for 3 weeks, religiously refreshing the ESPN website, hoping to see the new poll, or just waiting for the app push notification you get on your phone to see where they're going to be ranked. Now, it's no longer a surprise. You are a solidified top 20 team.
And, I feel like, and I've said this several times today, I felt like going into Saturday's game, after you'd beaten Ole Miss, after you'd beaten Texas A&M, you had probably done enough to lock up your spot in the NCAA tournament. They were a 6th seed in Lenardi's latest bracketology at the end of last week, but beating a top 25 Florida team like that, you are 100% in. I don't care what happens over the next 2 games of the regular season. If you get bounced in the first game in the SEC tournament, you are playing meaningful basketball in the month of March.
See, this is where I'd like to formally welcome Lamont and the South Carolina Gamecocks to the land of the locks. You have bought your ticket, you're on the train, and you are going to land of the locks because you're going to be dancing in March. And David Kleiniger owes me $5 now. So.
Oh, okay, personal bet. What was the bet?
That they would not make the NCAA tournament after the LSU game.
Oh, that recently?
He said, yeah.
Wow.
And I get it though. I get it. There is some scarring amongst the fan base or amongst people that have covered South Carolina basketball for a long time. Right. And Jay's talked about it a ton too on the show. This program has seen some horrific Februaries.
Sure.
And it's time. And that loss to LSU was a sub 80 net team. That was a quad 3 loss. That's one that if you didn't pick up the wins you've had in the last 2 weeks, could cancel out a lot of your quad 1 wins, especially considering Grand Canyon was no longer a quad 1 win.
Right.
And that Ole Miss is no longer a quad 1 win, and now that they dropped out of the top 75 in net, it could in theory They could have played themselves on the bubble if they didn't respond the way they have.
And I get that reaction, especially when you blow a 16-point lead to a subpar LSU team, and then you look at like, okay, Ole Miss, they're really good at home. A&M also really good at home. Like those next two games themselves look pretty daunting, not to mention the task of playing Florida and Tennessee back-to-back. We've checked all three of those boxes, and now on Wednesday night, you are playing now number 4 Tennessee for a chance to win or at least claim a share of the SEC regular season championship. Like, nobody, maybe Gamecock Larry, would have predicted this before the season started. None of us. And I thought they were going to make an improvement from year 1 to year 2. I didn't think they were going to maybe even the top 5. But, hey, if they could get like 7 or 8 in the SEC, that's great. That's fantastic. That's a leap forward. But this, nobody saw this coming.
It's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have seen this coming in my wildest dreams if I'm a South Carolina fan. Like, did I think they were going to be last in the SEC like they were picked? No, because I knew Vanderbilt wasn't going to be good. I knew LSU wasn't going to be very good. I knew the bottom of the SEC was very beatable, and that you could find yourself 9th, 9th, or playing in the starting your SEC tournament on Thursday as opposed to last year you did it on Wednesday.
Sure.
That's kind of where I thought this team was, but to see them really outplay expectation to a level that nobody else in college basketball has is remarkable. It's a testament to A, Lamont's coaching job, and B, the maturity of this team. Like, this team goes into games and has all year long expecting to win despite not experiencing the results before this season.
Right.
Like, they were going into November games, December games, expecting to win every single game.
Sure.
Despite not having a sample size previously that tells them you can do this.
Well, and especially when you talk about essentially rebuilding your starting 5 with the exception of Meechie Johnson, you don't know how these guys are going to gel together when you bring them together on a team. You can look at their individual performances from their respective schools, Cooper at Minnesota and, BJ Mack at Wofford and all that kind of stuff, and say, hey, that's great. But when you put these guys together in a new team, you can't guarantee they're all going to be able to play together well. But it's turned out fantastic. And again, they've proven a lot of people wrong and had the opportunity to really prove people wrong, not only claiming a share of the SEC championship potentially, but also having one of those coveted double buys in the tournament next week.
And that, I mean, still some things can go wrong in terms of not getting to that double buy, but you have done a really good job of solidifying that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've thought about it all weekend that this team, after last season, is having a chance at CLA to have the number 1 spot in the SEC going into the last day of the regular season.
It's insane. And by the way, that Tennessee game, 7 o'clock on Wednesday night, we'll obviously have pregame coverage starting here at 6:30 on the game. National television going to be on ESPN2. All eyes are going to be on this game. Big deal, big stage. And again, this is a Tennessee team. You went into their house and controlled them for 40 minutes. Now, yes, they were playing out of their mind right now, and Dalton Knecht is a different kind of animal, even compared to what you saw just a couple of weeks back out there in Knoxville. But again, the South Carolina team has stepped up to the task against every opponent that they played for the most part, so you don't doubt their ability to go out there and win Wednesday night either.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't put it out. Maybe after the LSU game, I thought, yeah, Tennessee's probably going to come in here and get that vengeance,
Sure.
But, and as good as Tennessee plays on the road, you can't definitively say, yeah, Tennessee's absolutely winning this game by 10-plus points. As good as they are, the way this South Carolina team is in every single game and the way they can control every single game, I really don't care who they play. They're going to have a chance,
right?
Unless they're playing at Neville Arena. That's really the only other time where they're probably not in it.
Nobody's really winning at Neville Arena, let's be honest here. But thankfully, you don't play there in the SEC tournament, and you don't play there in the NCAA tournament as well. So fears alleviated for that one. On the other side of things, a real shocker here, the women's team's still number 1 in the AP poll. I know.
Stunned.
You have to catch your breath after that one.
Stunned. Yeah, stunned that the undefeated team in the regular season is going into the postseason number 1.
And I know we're almost kind of numb to the accomplishments of South Carolina women's basketball because they've just done almost everything with the exception of an undefeated national championship season. But 2 back-to-back undefeated seasons, especially with the amount of turnover that you had after last year, is nothing to squawk at. Like, this is a major accomplishment. We knew they were going to be good. South Carolina women's basketball is always good, but to do this, to run the table through the regular season once again and position yourself as a top seed in the SEC tournament, another top seed in the NCAA tournament, like, this is amazing.
I mean, that's the thing, too, is that you look back on it, and not often, I get that Coach of the Year usually goes to a coach who takes somebody, like a Lamont Paris situation.
Sure, which he absolutely should be.
Yes, you take a team that was, maybe bad or underperforming the year before, and you make them outplay expectation. Don did that with an undefeated team. Like they were 36-1 last year and lost an entire starting five and then just reloaded and went undefeated in the regular season again. That is so difficult. On the men's side, like UConn's Danny Hurley kind of has had a similar season where he lost a lot of key players. Didn't lose all of his starters, but lost 3 of his top 5 leading scorers, and they are just as they're more dominant than they were last season. But what Don's done to be able to take an entire starting 5, have them walk out that door and all that experience, and then make a new starting 5, add in new player, add in 2 impact freshmen, add an impact transfer, and be able to make everything work to where most of the coaches who have come into CLA this year in the postgame pressers have said that this team is better than last year's, or they're harder to prepare against.
Right.
Maybe better isn't the best word, but they're so much different that they're so hard to prepare against because they can beat you in so many different ways is remarkable.
Is it extreme to say they might even be better than last year's team? I mean, I know last year's team was dominant, and
yes,
they play that similar style of physical defense, which has become a signature for Don Staley. But again, that versatility on offense, being able to beat you in a variety of ways with so many different players being able to step up. Like, I don't want to play them in the tournament.
No, I think last year's team probably was harder to score against. This year's team is harder to guard. And even with that being said, this team now, this year, is hard to score against because you have 2 of the best rim protectors in the entire sport, and Camilla and Ashlyn Swatkins, at the back line of your defense that don't allow anybody to shoot well from 2. I mean, almost a lot of coaches that have come in this year to CLA have talked about you kind of have to settle for a lot of pull-up jumpers. You can't you can't confidently get to the rim against them without fear of that ball getting swatted into the 5th row of the stands.
Which that's the most uncomfortable shot to take, is those pull-off jumpers, which again is why teams aren't as effective against this team, in their defense. Which, by the way, shout out to Don Staley and everybody that was able to put together Camila Cardoso's mom and sister being able to come watch her play in person for the first time in 8 years, even going back to her high school days. Like, that is awesome. Yesterday was senior day, and I know they'll still play a tournament game at CLA, but be able to see that was really cool. And her going out there and balling out once again, which doesn't surprise anyone, was very cool to see.
Oh yeah, 18 points, 13 rebounds, and she fouled out. I mean, if she didn't get in foul trouble, I mean, she could have put up some cartoonish numbers.
That just allows her to get the ovation walking off the court.
Exactly. Yeah, it allows her to get that ovation and Dawn not to have to pull her off the floor in a potentially tight game. But 18 points, 13 rebounds with a ton of WNBA scouts in attendance, specifically the teams that hold the 2, 4, and 5 spots in the draft. I think I know where she's going to end up, and I don't think she's making it past either of those teams.
I was going to say, she may not be the number 1 pick like Aaliyah, but she's going to be a very high pick in the upcoming WNBA draft. We will hit some more of the headlines that are happening on this Monday morning coming up. It is the Halftime Show. He's Elijah Campbell. I'm Tyler Head. We're going until 3 here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you. Elijah Campbell hanging out for the hour before he takes the reins of 3 until 6, all by himself. Continue to hit the headlines for today on this Monday. This news coming out a little over an hour ago, and not really to the surprise of anyone. Jason Kelce officially announcing his retirement after 13 years in the NFL. Of course, the Eagles got bounced in their first playoff game this year against the Tampa Bay Bucks. A lot of speculation coming away from that game about conversations he had in the locker room and kind of emotional messages and stuff like that. It really seemed like this was going to happen, but he had not formally announced anything until today. Rightfully, he was very emotional about it. Again, a guy that has been only a part of the Eagles in that 13-year career, a mainstay of that team, and really just one of the best all-around good guys in the NFL. And I know a lot of us have gotten more familiar with him with the podcast and doing stuff with Travis and commercials and all that kind of stuff over these past couple of years, but just kind of an all-around great player, all-around great guy, and someone the game is going to miss, but no doubt is going to be wearing one of those gold jackets one day.
Oh, yeah, and is going to be in one of those rare, I guess, categories of guys who retired when they were still arguably at their best. I mean, he was still like an all-pro center.
Sure.
These Eagles teams the last 2 years have been some of the best running teams in the NFL because you have that guy anchoring your offensive line. It's remarkable how he did play over a decade at an incredibly physical position where you are going through a series of car accidents every snap, and the guy moves other large human beings about as well as anybody else in the NFL can. And it's an underappreciated position, and it's one where it's hard to fathom how good he was for so long.
Right, and I think it's also worth noting, for centers, he's kind of undersized. And I've heard Andy Reid talk about this when he drafted him in the 6th round out of Cincinnati, that, yeah, we liked you, but you were a little bit undersized, but you were a tough guy, and we thought we could slide in very well. 6'3", 295, like to us, obviously that's big, but compared to other, offensive linemen, that is definitely on the shorter side. So, yeah, for him to be able to not only, have that disadvantage, but play at that high level like he did, again, for 13 years, all as a Philadelphia Eagle, nothing short of remarkable. He could have come back next year and played at a high level once again, been in the Pro Bowl, and certainly been in the mix for, taking the Eagles to another playoff appearance as well. But, yeah, again, kind of retiring at the top of his game, and you like to see that. Now, yeah, there's certainly guys that hang around maybe a little bit past their prime. I kind of look at Julio Jones now and be like, whew, you're not the same Julio they were a couple years ago. I get it. Chase the bag, get some money and continue to live the luscious life. But he's not where he was a couple years ago, with the Falcons. And it is sad to see the decline, certainly. But for a guy like Jason Kelce, again, at a very physical position, a very tough position, to be undersized and play at that high level, nothing short of remarkable. And somebody, again, that no doubt is going to be in the Hall of Fame one day.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know if it'll be first ballot or not because I'm not as familiar with, the details of the voting and how many people can get in, who's going to be in his class. But hard to say, but it would not be a shock if he ended up being a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, I think, 9 Pro Bowls?
7 Pro Bowls in 13 years.
Yeah,
with
7 Pro Bowls,
6 times an All-Pro.
And the All-Pro's the big one. The All-Pro's the most important one. And being named All-Pro, which is the best at your position for almost half the seasons in your career,
right,
along with winning a Super Bowl, is pretty remarkable.
And I don't think he's going to be going away anytime soon. I very much think he's probably going to slide into one of those TV roles, maybe as a desk analyst, or I know he did on one of the Eagles off weeks. He was on the Amazon Prime broadcast with, Kirk Herbstreit and Al Michaels. So he could probably slide into one of those roles. Again, he's got the personality for it. He has the name. People are obviously familiar with him and just very well liked all around. So I hope he's still around to, continue to give insight on football, which, again, will still free him up for more time with his family and that kind of stuff, not have to do the grind of the NFL season. But again, one of the best centers of all time, calling it a career.
Yeah, I can agree with that. One of the best and more productive centers in the history of the game. And, good for him that his, I guess, image is increased a little bit because of his brother dating Taylor Swift.
Sure.
And maybe he will get the recognition he deserves. There's probably not a lot of undersized centers who have a career like that,
right,
who maybe get that type of recognition. But I'm glad he's getting that. And it is remarkable to think that a Butch Jones recruit is about to go into the NFL Hall of Fame here in a few years.
You just had to throw that one in there, didn't you?
That's the thing. That's a thing. They're apparently really close.
Well, you know what? This frees him up to do all the keg stands he wants outside of Chiefs games this fall.
Honestly, that's the most fun I think we've seen Jason Kelce is going to his brother's games and taking his shirt off in ice cold Buffalo.
He does not lack self-confidence, I'll say that much.
No. Absolutely not. No, and I mean, most normal humans do not take their shirt off in that type of weather, but that
No.
man is well insulated.
Yes, he absolutely is. Another headline that I saw earlier this morning, very excited for this one, the EA Sports College Football video game set to return this summer. Over 10,000 FBS football players have signed on to be a part of the game. Again, we heard this news a couple weeks back. They were offering $600 and a copy of the game to any of them that wanted to be. You didn't have to, but you had the option. Little app that you sign into, putting all your personal information. I imagine there's probably like take a picture of your face so they can scan it into the game and all that kind of stuff to give us truly accurate rosters for the first time in EA Sports college football history. And again, there's still an opportunity for some of these guys to sign on, but it seems like, as we kind of expected, just about everybody wants to be a part of this game.
Yeah, it's cool that the days of throwing, for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns with QB number 7.
That's right.
Over. Completely over. Or maybe the auto-generated names that the game did for the last few years before they discontinued them, where it would just make up names, where like Johnny Manziel, instead of being Johnny Manziel, he is Dan Smith.
Right. I always downloaded the roster, so.
See, and that's smart. I was too lazy.
Yeah.
But especially like for college baseball video games, I definitely just auto-generated.
Yeah,
names.
those I did because, and again, I had the 07 game, so I was like, I'm not going to remember who half these players were at this point in time anyway, so it's not really that, that big of a deal. But it is amazing that, and look, that's obviously ended up being their downfall that led to the O'Bannon case and everything, to take the game away. But the fact that EA Sports got away with doing the quarterback number 7, the quarterback number 2, the halfback number 21 for Marcus Lattimore for all those years, and it took until 2013 for somebody to finally say, hey, wait a minute, that's me in that game. I should be getting paid for that is actually kind of remarkable.
It is, and it took. I love the story of how Ed O'Bannon got, I guess maybe inspired to take it to court, where
right.
he's, his neighbor was playing this game, and of course the NCAA basketball, I think it was 13.
Yep.
It was the one with Kevin Love on it. Oh no, it might have been 09 actually, with Kevin Love on it.
Yeah, that was 09. Blake Griffin was on
That's right.
10.
That's right, and that was the last basketball video game.
Yes, which I really hope they bring that back to.
Oh, those were so much fun. But in that game, you could play with classic teams, and and his neighbor is in his garage playing NCAA basketball 09 with the 95 UCLA Bruins, and he goes, hey, look, that's you. I'm playing as you. And Ed O'Bannon first was like, oh, that's really cool. Yeah, that is me. And his neighbor's
wait a minute.
His neighbor's son goes, and isn't it amazing you're not getting paid a single cent for this?
Stupid kid.
Ruined it for everybody.
Which, let's be honest, this would have caught up with them eventually anyway. Again, they got away with it for a long time. We all knew what was going on. We all knew who those players were. But yeah, it finally came to be. And here's the thing: this had to happen this way for us to eventually get the game back. It would have gone away at some point anyway. And I'm happy that it's going to be back. I'm happy that again it's going to be as close to legit as possible with full rosters. And man, I'm saving up my pennies for a PlayStation 5 come this summer because I've been holding out, knowing this was on the horizon, waiting for the time.
Yeah, I like to avoid spending money like the plague, but I'm going to have to drop a bag on getting a PS5, and I will get this game. This will convince me to upgrade my video game and save up to get a PS5 just because I'm so curious as to how this is going to be, and I have a feeling it's going to be so much fun.
Well, Wes, Chris, and I were talking about trying to organize our own little individual tournament in here.
Ooh.
Like a 107.5 game tournament for this, which I'm very much on board with.
Especially like in the summer if this thing drops, like it usually would.
It's supposed to be in July. Like it used to. So we got like another month and a half until football actually starts back.
The gears are turning here of the things that we could do with this.
I'm a multi-time national champion. I've won several Heisman trophies, so I feel pretty confident in my abilities.
Yeah, I've taken many a group of 5 school to a BCS bowl.
Okay.
Very decorated.
So I've already selected the team that I'm taking to the next dynasty. Kennesaw State, in their first year in FBS, I'm taking the Owls, hooty hoo, to the national championship.
Hooty hoo. I love it. Hey, they went to their first NCAA tournament this past year. You can take them to their first.
Fifth Third Bank Stadium is going to be the place to be in college football, thanks to me.
That's right. They'll turn all the dozens into all the thousands there.
That's right. The bank is going to be rocking.
All right, the nickname for the stadium. I love it.
That's actually what they call it.
They are going. Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, the bank.
They will appear in a video game before appearing in an FBS football game.
That's
which is
insane.
Something that I don't think any other team can claim.
Here's the funny thing. I visited their campus before they ever actually played a legitimate football game. They started in 2013. I believe, and they were selling books. They were selling T-shirts in the bookstore that said "Still Undefeated," which was true. I don't know how long
You're
that
not
streak
wrong.
lasted, but
Still winless.
same thing. I
Also
could
undefeated.
take him to a national championship before they play a legitimate snap of football at the FBS level. So I'm
That's the
excited
goal.
for that.
That's the goal. And then I will be the anti-Rick Stock still and go to Middle Tennessee State for 1 year and then cash out as soon as I can for a better job.
It's like
Sorry, kids.
No, you got to give the press conference too. Like, no, I'm committed to being the coach at this university for a long time to come and get introduced as the next coach at Michigan the day after or something like that.
I really wish they did put in like a game feature, an option where you're asked a question by a media member, like, are you seriously, considering the Michigan job? And then like adamantly deny that there is any interest at all. I am committed to Tulane, and then have the option to leave a
That's
day
what I was
later.
going to say. As soon as you answer that question, board plane, go back to watch film. What are you going to choose?
Board plane, go back to watch film, call an emergency press conference at 1 a.m. circa Lane Kiffin in 2009.
Team meeting.
Call team meeting, or do what I like to call the Brian Kelly, and that's dip out of town as fast as you can and just send a mass text.
That's right, and develop a different accent as well.
That's right. The possibilities are endless with this game.
Excited for that game to come back. Also excited because today is March 4th, and that means it's the greatest day in the history of the world. We'll hit that coming up. It is the halftime show. He's Elijah Campbell. I'm Tyler Head. On your Monday, here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. He's Elijah Campbell. I'm Tyler Head, going with you until the top of the hour, then handing the reins over to Elijah from 3 until 6. Reminder, coming up tomorrow night, Carolina Calls with Coach Paris, 6 o'clock right here on the game. Baseball is going to be on our sister station, ESPN 1320 WISW. Pre-game coverage at 6:15, first pitch at 6:30 for their game against the Citadel. It is indeed time for the greatest day in the history of the world. Let's first turn the clock back 1927. Babe Ruth becomes the then highest paid player in Major League Baseball history when he signs a 3-year, $70,000 per season contract with the New York Yankees. I want you to take a guess at how much $70,000 is worth in today's money.
Oh, man. I mean, it's got to be in the millions. I mean, obviously, I think we have to have like a good correlation.
How many millions? Again, he was the highest paid player in the league at this point in time.
Let's do 100.
100 million? Ooh, a little off. Try 1.2 million.
Dang. I was overshooting that by a mile. Goodness gracious.
So he was getting paid roughly $1.2 million per season in today's numbers to play literally the greatest baseball player of all time at that point in time to play for the Yankees.
Wow. It's amazing now to see some of the contracts that are signed. Zach Wheeler had his extension today from the Phillies, and that broke records. And that's,
doesn't every contract break records?
They do now.
Especially with high-end players, especially when we talk like the NFL, like the next quarterback to get paid is going to be the highest paid quarterback of all time until the next one comes along. Whenever we get to $1 billion, call me. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, wow.
Oh, $600 million, $600 million, no big deal. Whatever. Next one's just going to top that. When we touch $1 billion, then wake me up.
We're getting closer to that because Patrick Mahomes did become the first. He did sign the first, I guess, $500 million contract.
He did
over the course of obviously a lot of years, but
he plays at this high level for longer. Could be talking about that billion, which is unfathomable to think about.
I'm very curious as to who the first one would be. Like that is such a good title because I want to say the first $1 million athlete. I know in basketball it was Pete Maravich. He's the first $1 million, the first $1 million contract. So to be able to get from that in like the 70s to now, be pretty remarkable.
Oh yeah, for sure. Let's see here. We'll stick with money here, and we'll go to 1976. MLB San Francisco Giants are bought for $8 million by Bob Lowry and Bud Hearseth. Back in 1976, $8 million back in 1976. How much do you think that is worth in today's money?
$8 million in 1976?
1976.
Oh, man. Let's do... Can't overshoot it this time. Let's do $80 million.
So you think it's worth $80 million?
Yeah. I definitely undershot that.
I'm going to cut that in half. $44 million.
Oh, man.
Is what it would be worth in today's money. What do you think the Giants are valued at right now?
Ooh. Oh man, that's tough. They're top 3 in the majors, I think.
They are one of the highest
because they have one of the highest payrolls. And
yes,
they were in the Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes, and if you ain't got that cash, you cannot be in that discussion. Man, I can't even give a good guess.
Last March, Forbes listed them as a total value of $3.7 billion.
Wow. That's. I would say they've done a really good job as a good investment.
I was going to say that investment has grown quite a bit.
A lot of money
in not even 50 years. We're not even there yet.
Isn't it remarkable, like how lucrative like professional sports has become since then?
Absolutely.
All it takes is getting all the games on TV and making it that more accessible.
And that's kind of the crazy thing to me, especially in today's world of like college football, where literally every single thing, college sports in general, every single thing can be viewed on TV. If I want to watch Division III football on a Saturday, ESPN Plus has that. I can watch it. Where back in literally just 30 years ago, you had one game on TV during the regular season. That was it.
There was a day and time too where the NBA Finals were on tape delay.
That's insane.
Like there was a moment in time where you couldn't watch the NBA Finals live, and of course back we mentioned the Babe Ruth thing earlier. Like he signed that big contract. It's nowhere, not even a fraction of what contracts are now.
Yeah.
And the only way you could watch a game is to attend it. Rarely, I guess, were they on TV, and rarely, would you be able to listen to it.
Right.
A lot of what you knew about Babe Ruth was written by Grantland Rice, and insert famous sports writer here in newspapers.
I go back to not all that long ago. NFL had the policy of blackouts. If your team did not sell out its game, you could not watch it at home in your local market. And they realized, like, oh, we make way more money off TV than we do with gate sales. Who cares about a blackout?
Yeah, and then we have an entire season, in the pandemic where you didn't have any stadiums at capacity, and in some stadiums there were nobody there, and you still made hand over fist money by just having them on TV.
Which next week is the anniversary of everything being shut down. Like, I sometimes just randomly go back and think about how weird sports were at that point in time, watching NFL games in the middle of the day on Wednesday because one team didn't have enough players available on Sunday and weird things like that. Like, it's a very interesting thing to look back on. Obviously, it's shaped not only the world, but sports as well in the years since. But, man, what a bizarre time.
Yeah, that night was, March 12th, I guess, when Rudy Gobert tested positive. They canceled that.
Either 12th or I think the 13th is when everything officially shut down.
Yeah, because I think it was the night of the 12th, that Wednesday night, because that was the first night of the SEC tournament.
That's right.
We had remote shows planned in Bridgestone, and we were told to stand by. We went from, hey, don't come here tomorrow. We're going to play these games with no fans, to that morning being like, hey, we might just cancel this whole thing.
I think if I remember correctly, the Big East tournament played all the way to Friday morning.
They played
like
half
early
a game.
afternoon, played like half a game, and then shut everything down. And then we were in for however many months of bizarreness.
I want to say it was like
crazy.
St. John's and Creighton or St. John's and Xavier.
That sounds correct, because it was the only sporting event happening that day.
Everything else was
which
canceled.
was weird.
And it was like, everybody else is canceling. Why are they still playing? They played an entire half of basketball. That was
Well, at that point in time, the
week.
NCAA tournament had already been canceled.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what are you guys playing for?
They're playing for the last game.
That's right, I guess.
Before everything stops.
The last one I want to throw in here, 2008, Brett Favre retires for the first time as a Green Bay Packer. That was very short-lived.
That was incredibly short-lived. That might have been one of the shortest retirements ever. And I love, you can't talk Brett Favre retirement without having the prepositional phrase for the first time afterwards.
Or you talk about it which time? Oh, that time.
His second retirement.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like, well, I'm done. I'm not. I'll come back. Oh, I can be a Jet? Cool. Or no, he was the Viking.
A Jet, then Viking.
Jet, then a Viking. Yeah.
The Jets for the year, and they absolutely blew their chance at a playoff run in the last half of the year. And then he decided to continue his career by playing for one of the arch rivals of the team he played for a bajillion years.
And let's not bring up Saints and Bountygate.
Nope, not for him. But I will bring up his final pass of his career, which definitely was on target in the hands of Tracy Porter to help send that game to overtime.
What a career, Brett Favre. First retirement this day back in 2008. And they turned the reins over to some guy named Rodgers. How'd that end up working out?
I'm sure after that, it's so hard to follow up Brett Favre that there's no way you can have another quarterback take you over a decade into perennial success and maybe a Super Bowl. There's no way that could happen again.
You know what? Both of them only gave Green Bay one Super Bowl, which is insane to think about.
That is. And I think Aaron only appeared. Yeah, only appeared.
Only appeared in one. That's right.
And won it. Brett got to appear in one more.
Yep.
But they both, had them for so long.
Generational talents. One Super Bowl apiece.
One Super Bowl.
Crazy.
But you take it, though. I mean,
it's better than
you
no
always
Super
take
Bowls.
it. But there's, especially towards the end of Aaron's time there was a couple of years, especially that last one they lost to.
Well, that's what got McCarthy fired. It's like you can't get him back to the Super Bowl, and then LaFleur couldn't do it either.
Yep, exactly. And now Aaron Rodgers, also following the steps of Brett Favre, becomes a Jet, which means
he'll be a Viking
this
in a few
time
years.
next year. He will be the quarterback
That's
of the
right.
Minnesota Vikings.
We'll come back and wrap up today's edition of the Halftime Show. Hit the Firehouse Subs text of the hour as well. He's Alex Campbell. I'm Tyler Head here on The Game. Welcome back in, halftime show. Tyler Head and Elijah Campbell. A couple more minutes here before post-game show with exclusively Elijah Campbell today, as Jay is also out.
That's right. The Elijah Campbell takeover of
That's right.
his own show.
Dang,
is
I
happening
should
today.
have been calling today the Tyler Head Sports Experience the whole time.
This would have been the great
This
day
would
to
have been
do
the perfect day. Well, here's the thing. There's going to be some days next week that it is the Tyler Head Sports Experience because Terry will be out, gone at a conference. So
Surely we can make some imaging.
we can
I
make
think
some
we can
imaging,
absolutely
sure.
make some imaging that's where it's like, the halftime show. Just kidding.
I've
Tyler
had
Head Sports Experience.
I've had some ideas. Trust me.
We'll implement them.
Time to hit the Firehouse Subs text of the hour. Craig weighing in. News that I was going to get to at this point in the show anyway, but coming out within the past hour. Michi, National Player of the Week. 25-point performance on Saturday against Florida. First back-to-back double-digit scoring game since the beginning of conference play with Mississippi State and Alabama. He's had his ups and downs this year, and even in some of those games where he wasn't scoring in double figures, was finding his way to contribute an assist and rebound. So it's not like he was doing nothing in those off games, but it's definitely been an up and down season for Michi Johnson, and good to see him maybe catching fire at the right time here.
Yeah, he's definitely been, while he might not have been the most reliable scorer all season long, even those games where he wasn't a good scorer, his ability to get into the paint and generate the looks that this team likes to do. I mean, how many threes this year has Jacoby Wright on a catch and shoot got because it was generated by Michi getting into the lane, or a Talon Cooper shot on the perimeter because Michi got into the lane, or maybe Michi draws a forward and you get a Josh Gray / Colin Murray Boyles dunk or BJ Mack look because Michi was able to get into the lane and have to make defenses scramble. He's really good at that, and that's where a lot of his value on the offensive side is even if he's not shooting really well, he's got the reputation now where you have to guard him outside the three-point line no matter what kind of shooting day he's having. You got to take him seriously as a threat out there, and he is a threat at any time to make his next 7 jumpers.
And in addition to being National Player of the Week, he's also SEC Player of the Week as well, which
The awards, man.
That just makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It would be kind of odd if somebody else was the SEC Player of the Week and not Michi.
It's almost kind of like when a quarterback wins the Heisman, but somebody else wins the Maxwell Award for the best quarterback in college football. Somebody else wins that, and it's like, I feel like this should have been a clean sweep, right?
In theory, that should be a clean sweep. So it is kind of odd when you mix and match those. But you know what? I like uniformity. So Michi being the National Player of the Week and the SEC Player of the Week makes everything sound.
And that goes into addition to, once again, South Carolina men's basketball jumping up a spot in the AP poll from 18 to 17, which, again, going back to where we were a month ago, the AP poll, of course they're in the top 25. No big deal, right?
Yeah, it was such a huge deal a month ago,
right?
And now you're expected to be there, and now you're expecting to be in the top 20 at the end of the season, going into the SEC tournament. It's where you are. It's no longer a celebration to be ranked because you expect to be ranked.
I brought this point up earlier, and again, I went to University of Georgia, so I've kept up with Georgia basketball for a long time. I've never had more fun following a basketball team than what we've done this year with South Carolina. And getting to be a part of this the way that we are, this team is so fun to watch. Again, it exceeded a lot of people's expectations, and I can't wait to see. Hopefully they make a decent run in the tournament. But this year has been so much fun following this team.
It has. It absolutely has. And it is a bunch of things, right, kind of into one. It's the surprise of, oh, wow, it's December, and you have as many wins now as you did all of last year.
Right.
There's progress. Let's see what happens in SEC play. Oh, well, go to Alabama, you get humbled. This is kind of maybe what they are. Well, let's try to get, a close to 500 record in the SEC and just play for the NCAA tournament to, oh, we should be ranked. Oh, we just beat number 6 Tennessee on the road. Oh, we just beat Kentucky at home by 17 points, a top 10 Kentucky team by 17 points, to now, oh, there are 2 games left on the schedule, and if you win those, you are the SEC regular season champions. It is remarkable to kind of see that the change in expectation and the change of goals.
Yep.
Like my goal for this team, if as an observer, as a third-party observer after what happened last year, win 14, 15 games, 16, 17, have a respectable season.
If you could knock on the door of the top half of the SEC, that's great improvement.
That would have been a win.
Sure.
That would have been a win. But you've just taken that small goal and completely blown it up into the aspirations are SEC championships.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's, I kind of buried the lead in a tweet, shout out to Joe Rexrode for keeping me accountable there, where I was like, the playing in the top 4, starting your SEC tournament on Friday is incredibly likely now. And he goes, well, why not win the SEC? You got the chance with Tennessee in town on Wednesday and a Mississippi State team on the road that you've already beaten this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Standing in your way.
Can't wait to see what happens there. Quickly as we wrap up, what's coming up on the postgame show?
Oh, a lot of good stuff. We have Mark Kingston, South Carolina baseball coach. He's going to join me at 3:30 for his weekly visit.
Nice.
Going to talk about the Clemson series this past weekend and maybe what's in store for the rest of the year. Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central going to join me at 4:30 to obviously break down some of that baseball series and the big hoops weekend with Lamont's team beating Florida and then Don's team finishing a perfect regular season. So a lot of stuff to get into today on the Postgame Show.
Well, that's coming up next right here on The Game from 3 until 6 with Elijah.